CloudDB, shaping your new normal.
Hello everyone, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the 2022, apologies, let's start again. Welcome to the 2022 APEX Days by Apaco UC. This is our first year having a dedicated APEX event, and it's our honor and privilege to run this event with the support of the India Oracle APEX user group. Please remember to register to as many sessions as you can. This way we'll be able to have access to our replays until April 20. Basically, even if you miss one of the sessions, you can go register in the agenda, and then you can, your personal agenda under the attendees tab, you will have access to the replay links. I would like to say thanks to our Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible, and also to our sponsors, the Oracle ACE community, the DevRel team, and our main sponsors, Oracle Corporation and CloudDB. Now for today's session, APEX Security Revamped by Lino Schildenfeld. Please feel free to write questions at any time during the session by using the chat tab of live webinar on your right lower corner of your screen, and the speaker will be answering all your questions at the end of the session. If there are any issues during the presentation, please feel free to contact me at any time by using the same chat, and I will try to help you the best I can. Now, without any more delays, I would like to leave you with this amazing session by Lino about APEX. Lino, the room is yours.
Thanks, Francisco, and thanks everyone for joining in. This is, as Francisco said, it's nice to have APEX events happening and starting again. So this is the first of the year for me, so first presentation, and I'm hoping you guys are gonna enjoy it. Francisco already said it's gonna be a recorded session, so even if you miss it, you have, I think, about a month and a half to sort of get on and see the session, right? I won't go into too many details. I'll just start my session, and hopefully you will be learning something new today, right? That's the idea. All good. I just have a little intro before I go into session details and sort of information I'm going to share with you. If you don't know, that there was a very interesting like APEX office hours or happened on March 17. If you missed it, you can always sort of go to APEX.com office hours and sort of check the sessions that the APEX team did, and this is really an interesting one, and I highly recommend it. I think there's going to be a next one happening this month as well, or the next month as well. So that's just a little bit about me. I spent my past 15 years roughly on Oracle APEX and Oracle in general, right? From Oracle Forms to reports. And pretty much nowadays, I specialize only in APEX, or mostly do projects that are APEX related. Some teams that I worked with and skill builders are my current consulting team. Pretty much I try to give back as much as I can writing blogs, so trying to contribute there, and I also try to be part of conferences as much as I can, right? In case you need to reach out, there's like many ways, probably Twitter or LinkedIn or just directly on my email. It's not hard to find me, right? With that said, a little bit like a warm-up for the session. So pretty much we know that attacks around us are happening every day, even probably when we like doing my session today as well. No one is safe from it, and I'm not like, the idea is here not to scare you, but I would like concentrate on the last two bullet points on the screen, which is like 90% of these breaches are due to human error, and of course we are humans and we are developers and we do these errors, right, as well. So that's what we're going to be concentrating on today, like how do we avoid making as many as we normally do, right? And an interesting one is the last one, which is like most of these attacks that happen that are successful, right, are never detected, or like half of them are never detected, which is just insane. In terms of like, we probably have systems that have been attacked many times that we didn't even have a clue about. So pretty much, of course, when we talk about security, there's like many levels of it, and we're aware of it. And today I won't be covering all of it. I don't say unfortunately, luckily for me, right? Because we can talk about this forever, right? And have spent days talking about security, but I'll be concentrating mostly on developer side of, or the view from developer side, right? How do we make our app secure on the application? So while we're developing these applications, right? And you'll see this quote around that there's like many versions of it, but like secure app is the only one that you can't access at all. So if you like don't use it at all and don't change it at all, pretty much you can count that your app is secure. Otherwise, pretty much it's probably there's something that needs to be tweaked on it, that needs to be improved in application or security sense, right? And my experience and experience that I had across multiple teams is like there's literally very little or even no security practices and standards across teams and clients and these applications that we build. Literally, security comes as last, which is worrying, right? And we as someone who is developing or who are developing, like as developers, we're trying to develop these. We need to stay ahead of the game, right? So same as viruses, right? We're paying people to scan our computers for viruses, right? Well, scanning your app, you can either pay someone to do it or you can do it yourself, right? And my idea or what's worrying me is like I always confront people is like, please take this seriously, right? Security is no game. It's not easy. We all know that. But what we're going to try to do here today is like give you some insight into how we can make this far easier for you. Like, and pretty much, yeah. If there wasn't for us, like us developers, Apex as such, and any code probably would be 100% secure, right? But that's where the potential for attacks happen when we start building and developing our applications, right? All good. Yep. And I have this slide, just I added it in, is I'm a big believer, right, that we can do this security and it can become a part of our practice and processes, right? With I don't say little, but I said little effort, but you'll see what I mean by it in terms of Apex gives us pretty much everything we need. We have all the tools we need to make this happen, right? So this is why we're today, or hopefully that's why you're with me today, right? We know Apex comes with different features, right? Like that with different versions, it's always been improved, and we love that about Apex team, that every new release gives us something new and different, right? And some old things and things that are familiar or should be familiar to us is like authentication, authorization, settings that we can configure, session handling things, session state protection, many APIs that we have available, and different tools like Advisor and external tools that we can apply and use for our apps to sort of improve the security, right? So without going into too many details on presentation, I'll jump over to my application. And pretty much so this is probably, if you haven't seen it, you might see it around. So during this season, I'll be presenting some sessions alone, some with my colleague, right? And or I like to use this as a base for my things that I'll be trying to explain and get across right for you guys. So first thing, so let's concentrate on, let's see some of the example in Apex that mostly hit us, that we I don't say not aware, but we are aware, but we sometimes just don't notice that they happen, right? So first of these is like access control problems, right? So let me close this because it's remembering that I was here from this morning. So what I'm trying to do here, it's very easy, right? So I have a display only item, and there is a button. So if I say edit page, just to show you, to give you insight, I have like an item. It's a display only item. You can see here. Let me zoom a little bit so you guys can see better. So that should do. So I have a display only item here, and pretty much all I'm trying to do is I have a button here, right? And on a button, I have some sort of authorization scheme. So it says I need to be an administrator, pretty much. Okay. But sometimes we see on the apps. So for example, I have here a hint. So I don't see a button. You can clearly see that there's no button on the page. So I'm kind of not an administrator, right? But let's assume I know there's a button with this name on a page. I can open my console, right? So I open my console, and easy as this. So you'll see what happens with, so I kind of have a default value here. Easy as that. I can submit the page. And let me close that now because that's now irrelevant. And you see that my value has changed, even though it's a display only item. Maybe this is not what I wanted, right? But easy as I haven't protected my app that well, or my page that well, and my item that well, that I can abuse that just if I know a little trick there. Let's look at another one. Another thing here, like I have an application process, right? And I can show you that one as well. So same application. I go to share components, I go to processes, and you'll see I have a dummy process here. And let's look at the code, and it's not doing anything. It's just like saying hello, right? Nothing too fancy and nothing special, right? And pretty much the idea is I know that the process exists, so that's my assumption, right? And I know the name of the process. And I can abuse that if it's not protected just by using the URL. And you can see the URL here, obviously. And if I press here, you can see that I actually managed to execute a process that I didn't necessarily had access to, or potentially I could, but if it's not protected well, I can just execute it using a URL, right? That's another common thing that people create processes and they don't protect it well. So just, I know we love or we hate the URL from Apex because it's clear as day what it's doing and what parameters we have in and sort of what goes where. But also people forget that using that same URL, which you can see that's an example of, or like a syntax for the URL, what we can have included in there. Pretty much I can be running processes and I can be setting these things as well, like items and stuff that we don't normally expect that people can do with these things. Okay, and the last demo on access control, right, which is really interesting. So I have a region. So on this page I have a region. I can show you that. And on this region, I have a protection like authorization scheme set, which says it should be some sort of is admin with flaw authorization scheme. So let me check what that is. So I have an authorization here, and this is the one is admin with flaw. So let me check what it is. So all I have here, so I'm referencing an application level item, and I'm saying, okay, if you're admin, you're going to return true, otherwise return false. So what I'm trying to say is only give that region back for someone who is admin, right? Okay, perfectly fine. Everything would work as expected and everything. And just let me show you guys the item. So I have the user role item here, or application level. And pretty much important thing to note, its session state is unprotected, right? And now, because now you know the elements behind it. So pretty much what I'm saying is I'm currently logged in as admin. So obviously I see the region, right? But easily as that, I have a URL here, and I'm again changing my application level item just using a URL. So instead of having an admin, which I can show you in the session, so you can see that it really is at the moment set to admin. So you see I have a admin application user role item is set to admin, right? Easily as just using a link again. So my best friend again is my worst enemy, right? So I click on it and you'll see what happens. So I actually lost that region because now for some unknown reason, right, potentially to people or to me, I lost that region. So I actually managed to change my application role, which actually managed to break my authorization, right? So I lost the region. And what also happened, I can show you that again. My application item now is not admin anymore. Now I change that value to test. And if I base my roles on this item, pretty much you can see that it's obviously can be easily used. I won't go into details why and how at the moment. We'll see that later. So I'm going to go ahead and give you some more examples about what else can be a problem. For example, I'm again here, session state, right? So we have, normally I have a display item. So this is just the form, just ignore the top because that's just the explanation a little bit what we can do and stuff. So I have an item here. And again, if we inspect it, there's nothing special with it. It's just a display only item, right? And what I want to show is like it's a text field, right? But I made it disabled, right? So text field where it's disabled, right? So some people might expect that I can't write in this item. So I'm trying to put my cursor in it, and I try to write. It doesn't do anything, right? But easy as I can just use JavaScript. But I managed to change the value of it, even though I maybe potentially didn't want to. And what also, again, I'm coming back again to the famous URL, right? I can abuse this display item, or let's say disable item. I can put the protection on a page, but I can maybe have a button or something, a process that's setting it. So if I click here on my page item, I can see here that I clearly changed the value. So it's about knowing what that item is for, who can change it, and what that item is meant to do, right? Not every item is the same, right? And similar way, I have an application level item where if I show you, I should have showed you before, but application level item, you'll see now that I have two in there. This is the one, and pretty much previously it was null. Now I've set it to hello people, even though maybe this needs to be better protected, right? All good. And then pretty much these are the most common ones, the access control, these session things that items are not well handled. And then we come to the obvious one, which is like SQL injections, right? So I have a few examples. This is like a report. So I have a report here underneath running on the query above. We might know straight away what's wrong. So I'm referencing, so I'm saying my APEX substitution variable here for my item. And I'm saying, okay, so I have a Scott. If I press submit, I'm expecting to get Scott for result, right? That's fine. If I try something cheeky like this, you'll see soon that maybe that implementation wasn't that great, right? So you'll see previously I had only one row and I expected just results from AMP, right? So one result from AMP or something. Now I'm literally getting all of the results from AMP. And clearly, so SQL expression, so SQL injection is like most common thing that we're going to see, and mostly with reports, right? Something like this, or dynamic SQL, right? I'll talk with about it. I just wanted to show you the most common examples of where we can encounter one. The other one, for example, that's really nice to show is this one. So I have let me do submit just to show you what I get at the bottom. So I'm trying to get into my collection all people that have a job equal to something that I provide as an input, right? And I can show you quickly what I have as wheels behind the screen. Okay, so this is my input, so that's a text field. So that's where I can enter what I want to get, what job I want to see, like clerk. I can submit and I get a clerk, right? So everyone who is belonging in a clerk, right? Or job equals to clerk. But what I maybe wouldn't expect is that I can abuse this API, right? Just because I have this syntax in there. So for example, if I enter something along these lines, which is pretty much, I would never come to it, but if I submit that, you'll see that the results might be something completely different. So I just didn't get results from AMP, right? I got results from APEX application pages, right? I can do any table, anything, any view, anything, whatever, and you can see obviously that we've broken what we, and this is the APEX collection create, and if you're using a dynamic query, we can also have issues there, right? So it's about being aware. And then last one that I'll do for SQL injection is like, for example, comments, right? I can do that one. So I have PL SQL code that we all used to, right? And then pretty much all I'm trying to do is display it on a page. So I do HTTP and I want to see it on a page. That's the message I see below, right? And this is the code I have behind the scene. So it's easy to, so I have default. If I can say that one, you'll see that I have a default message, hello there, right? If I change it to something else, which is something that I know will hurt me, right? And I submit it again, you'll see that my result will be something that I didn't expect, right? So I'm having inputs here that are being executed instead of treated as data, which is very bad and very wrong, right? And I'll go to cross-site scripting just to sort of warm you guys completely. I have here demo 1. So it's a dynamic action, and someone gave me a task. So this one is really interesting because I see it like we've seen it around. So my task is I have an item and I have a button, and pretty much someone asked me if I click, I want to see what value I entered. So it's just a dummy example, right? And how I can implement that is easily so I have a button. If I click submit, I have a dynamic action, and dynamic action is going to be, so let me just move this so you can easily read. So this is what I had as original, right? So I want to alert someone, I got the value that's ampersand, my item, I like dot syntax, right? Substitution syntax. Okay, so I don't want to save, and pretty much, yep, I can take, if I demo, if I clicked anything else, I could sort of get what I was typing, and I can submit, and I would get, just so I can have it in session state, then I would get demo 2 and stuff like that. But what if I trick this completely and enter something that's really bad, right? And I submit this. So to someone who is not familiar or doesn't know what this will do, it will try to trick my input so that it alerts something, and then it's try to execute the command, open a new window, right? Let's see if I'm going to succeed in that. So as you can see here, my input wasn't just this, it was way more than this. I had brackets and I had window open dot, I had like a JavaScript command. If I say okay, clearly you can see that I got another page, which means this thing managed to execute again. Similar to SQL, this is like a browser injection thing. It's not my code injection, but I'm trying to inject JavaScript code that executes within my browser. So this would be an issue, a huge issue for my page, right? And I'm gonna speed it up. Let's say this one. It's very silly, but it just shows the power of this thing. So I have 2 items, and I have before header, I have this process, right? So just let me move so that it's easier to read. All I'm saying is, if these 2 items, these 2 values that I enter, I want to just display whether or not they match. If they don't match, I'll display another message, right? Nothing you could see here wrong or that I would expect to be wrong, right? Yeah, but let's see how that would work, right? So if I was to be, let's say if I write 3 equals 3 and I submit my page, of course I would, you can see up there on the left hand side, it says they match, right? If I say 2, so does a 3 equal 2? I would expect, yeah, perfect, they don't match, right? Yay, my code works well, I can move it to production, right? That would be the idea. But if I am going to be a little bit naughty and I inject these things in there, and then I say submit, I'm actually going to break my page, but it's going to execute my JavaScript again. See, so I'm not on my URL. I can't even go back. If I try refreshing, yeah, it refreshes because it's removed these values, but it can inject JavaScript code and execute anything you want, right? Which means even though it was harmless by the looks of it, just this line, it still could hurt me, right? And I'm going back to my presentation. So today is about learning how we can prevent these things and why and how we should be doing it, right? So good news is we have all the mechanism, that there's nothing, okay, it's just down to our knowledge of where we can and how we can detect things, right? But everything is in there, right? Let's look and talk about authentication a little bit. It's pretty much, we all know it, we all use it, so rarely you're going to be abusing this, right? Rarely it's going to happen that someone abused your credentials, right? If it does happen, pretty much there are things that we can do to make this a little bit more tight, which is like use the password policies, for example, the complexity, or resetting the password every once in a while, password storage, so we need to be careful how we're storing the passwords. We can add 2-factor authentication, which is pretty much nowadays a must-have, I would say. Many versions of it, one-time password validation, so you get your email notification, or you just have a push notification on your mobile phone, right? Even for APEX, like anything that can be 2-factor authenticated, you can integrate with APEX, and there's quite a few examples out there already doing this, right? Also reCAPTCHA, if your app is open to public and it's accessible on internet, right? pretty much you can expect that someone will be hitting you with things to sort of break in and stuff. So one of the ways to protect yourself is using reCAPTCHA, right? Again, you'll find examples for Apex integration online as well. Going to authorization, right? What's that? It's kind of like, as you've seen in my app, I was trying to be an admin and then I had users who didn't have an admin role, right? So it's like trying to use a role-based control in my app, right? It's similar to database roles that we have. Someone can do this and execute and see tables and run queries where others can't do it, right? The beauty in Apex is pretty much, and I love this feature of Apex, is we can apply authorization to anything, almost anything we see on a page, like page, items, regions, buttons, branches, processes, computation, validation, you name it, you have it. And the latest since a few versions back is like dynamic actions. So even a true dynamic actions, like a true part of that dynamic action can have a authorization on it, which is just making us more secure and making us easy to control when things happen as well, right? Of course, authorization can be abused, right? So we've seen an example of access control vulnerability, and pretty much it's like down to us to remember where it can be set and should it be set. Like, for example, I mentioned buttons, branches, items, regions, processes, whatnot. If we forget one of them, it makes the whole thing break, right? There's a hole in the whole system. So you can apply security. As you've seen, I had a chain. I had an application item where I didn't protect well, and then I based my authentication on it, and then I had a region that was hiding or showing based on that authorization, depended again on the item, right? And if one of them was wrong, which my item was wrong, I was able to sort of break the access to it and sort of how things executed at the end. Again, remember that we have that famous Apex URL, even in the friendly URL version, right? It still gives us a clue how we can inject and send things to our engine and try to make Apex do things that we don't like. So with authorization, the tip is only try to apply consistently, right? And one of the most common ones that we forget is either pages are completely left open, right? So beauty is we have dictionary, or Apex comes with tons of Apex views that we have. Some of them we know, some of them we don't. Move. And pretty much what that means is I can use and I can query a view like Apex application pages or just Apex applications, for example, and I can say check whether or not these settings in there are valid. So for example, on pages, I would just say authorization is null. Find me everything in my app that has authorization is null. And trust me, you'll find these things consistently across all of your apps, right? If you have processes during your development lifecycle to sort of go through security scans, these things could be and can be avoided. The next level, again, with authorization is like, have you secured your buttons? Have you secured your items? Have you secured your regions and stuff like that? Which is, but everything that I just mentioned and everything we use in Apex can be pretty much queried out. And we'll come to that at the end of the session, right? So just hold on. Then I didn't show you settings, but we know that there's many versions and many levels of settings, right? So we have settings on instance level. I don't know if you ever had like Apex internal account and that you sort of browsed around. There's many instance level settings. Then we can have application level, which is mostly what we change and tweak. Then we have page levels, and then we have regions or item levels, right? All of these have some sort of setting on it, and you don't have to know straight up that which one is doing what or anything along these lines. It's about to be aware that these things exist on different levels, right? For example, instance level, like there's a like cookie workspace, or I can restrict my access by IP address, or I can allow or disallow public file uploads, or maybe I can control how many seconds after the login, after each login, so I can control and sort of increase that, or pretty much there's a Apex instance admin API, which I can also use to set these parameters. And there's roughly, I think that at the moment, there is 100 settings available. So that's quite a lot. And pretty much, just in case if you need to go through all of them and sort of check them out, there's Apex instance parameters dictionary view that we can also use to sort of control and see what parameters we have and have they changed and stuff like that. But it's good to know. And pretty much if you want to be executing Apex instance admin, you either need to be a sys or system, and or your user in database needs to have Apex administrator role, right? Because it's a highly privileged API, and we don't want everyone running it, right? But it's good to know that it exists, and then we can tweak instance level settings, right? If you need more information, of course, APEX-Oracle.com API is a place to be, right? And you can find all of it there. Another level is on application, right? We have session state protection. Sometimes people think if we just set it on application level that we are secure, right? Well, it's only one piece of the puzzle, right? So there's 3 levels of it. We can set authorization scheme, like a default one that's going to be applicable to all pages. So I want to show that one because people are not aware of that one. So this was my app, or this is my app. And let me go to, share components. So let me go to my authentication scheme, for example. So I have here one login, but I have 2 different authorizations, right? I have administrator role, and I have one with the flow, right? And if I wanted to make sure that my apps, this app was secure, I can simply go on the security attributes, and there is a nice config setting here which says I can just say a user might not be public, right? Or I can use one of my is admin with flow, or maybe I want an administrator that only can run. And this is now applicable to every single page in my app. So, okay, you can say, yep, but I can leave the pages now. Well, you need probably to use both, right? So you want to use this one as well. So I normally leave must not be public. And I also put on each and every page, right? This is how your app is 100% like protected. If you do it here, well, yep, it would be. But if it happens in the future that someone comes in and just changes just for like convenience or something, it means that all of your pages might be unprotected, right? And that's not what we want. So it's better to have it on both ends. And error handling function is one of these as well. It's hard to emphasize how important this is. Like so error handling function provides the details of what happens and why something is wrong, it didn't work. And the less info we provide back to the user, it's kind of, we're trying to be nice and polite and user-friendly. If you input something in and there's an error, we want to say, oh, nice, you had an error. But sometimes we give back too much information, like ORA errors or details about these ORA errors that come up. And these are perfect input for me as an attacker or someone who is like a user who wants to break in or do things that I shouldn't be doing, to actually use this information to sort of tweak my attacks, right? And error handling function is one of these, especially for SQL injections, right? We'll come back to it in a second. So on application level settings, right, there's an API again, and it's called Apex app setting, right? But it doesn't do the same thing as Apex instance admin API, right? So this is more to do with storing the variables that I have running at the runtime. And the only thing that I want to emphasize here is these settings. So for example, I can put a URL to my application, or I can put some sort of environment related things here, but I wouldn't be putting passwords or anything that needs to be securely protected, where these settings don't have any security on it. So anyone who can run Apex application settings, which is a dictionary view, or anyone who can just execute Apex setting get setting API will get the information what's hidden behind that value, right? Which is just an info to not to forget that. Now we're going to the page level. Well, on the page level again, we have authorizations, authentications. So we can set up rejoin sessions, deep links. Some of these are mutual, or they are common to application level or and instance level as well. but one that I emphasize is like page access protection. So PAP in short, right, which is the second level for complete session state protection of your apps, right? So app needs to be session state protect enabled, and then your page should also be session state protect enabled, right? And then we go, so we have session state for the page would be unrestricted arguments, might have a checksum, some of them you might see, and pretty much we should be using not just unrestricted, but we need to think when some of these pages could or should support these things and when they shouldn't. Moving forward is like session state handling and item protection, right? This is usually where we've seen, as I showed you in an example, where things can go wrong. So for session state, it's important that we have it and that we enable it on application level, right? And it's a form. It's trying to prevent attacks on us or on our apps that are tampering with URL. So we've seen the URL already in this presentation and in my demos. It's standard and everyone knows that it exists. So sometimes you have a URL that you see in Apex and you just want to change the value or tweak the ID. You don't want to get the ID 10, you want to get the ID 20, right? So this is the most common version of what people might do. And if you don't protect your page as well, you could sort of open the gate for problems on a session state level. Why it's easy for people, it's pretty much you just tweak the URL. You just try tweaking the URL until you manage to break it, right? And if you have apps that don't have session state protected enabled, pretty much making it at the end or doing it at the end, it's just making it harder for you. And why I said this is because Apex by default sets session state protection to on, which is like a must do and must have. But some older versions of your apps might not have it on, right? And then we're talking about item protection. So this is where usually it goes wrong, right? We need to sort of make sure that we use items based on the types on the right type and that we use it correctly, right? So I already mentioned I agree with the sentence that not all items are the same, even though everything in Apex sees as a text, right? No matter what we do, no matter what type we do, Apex always treats these things at the end as a text, right? So in our PL SQL, we should just be aware of just that, right? That would be helpful as well. But then again, our items are on a page. No matter what setting we have, there's three ways how we can change it. We can use just JavaScript or Ajax, right? We can use URLs, as you've seen me fiddling around and changing application items and page items, hidden ones or protected ones or whatnot. And pretty much the duty, the hardest thing is to make sure that all of the items in your apps, especially if they're huge, like if you have big apps and lots of items, and now you have to go retroactively or retrospectively put all of these security things on them to make sure that each one is like individually secure and rightly protected, right? Like there's many versions, like many different types, right? So application, page zero items, or we can separate them as user editable and non-editable items, or just hidden items, display only, read only, disable items, like it can be a number or some other type of item. So each one of these kind of asks us different questions and has a different ways how we can make sure that they're valid, right, and they're protected. One of the settings that we have on every item is maintain session state. And very useful one, it's pretty much, I think it's from version 19, but or maybe even 18, but on forms. So when you do a visit nowadays, Apex is always going to use on a form an ID. It's going to use memory only, right? So that that item and that ID is only valid until we are on the page. And once we move from that form page, it just doesn't store this value anymore. So if it doesn't store it, no one will detect what it was, and so it's shorter available to be like read out or found what it was, right? Previously we had per session, right, mostly, and pretty much it was always there on the form. You can read it out anytime you want it from your session state, which was kind of could lead to trouble, right? Sensitive items like social security numbers or something that we know people should not be seeing or reading out or whatever. So just bear in mind when we have passwords or something, that even though we can't read it on the screen, APEX still stores this in a table, like www. Oh, I think there's a typo there. Flow data, which at the end can be read by a DBA or someone, and if you don't set a setting on it, like encryption on that item level, anyone can read the values from that table out. For example, there's a query at the bottom that does exactly that, right? Application level items, pretty much it's something that we normally use for server-side logic, right? It can be session state protected as well, and very often it's forget and left exposed. User input, it's like a page needs to be on session state protection, that's a must, and then pretty much we need to validate and sanitize before we submit it to database. And it's a highly must do, is like we never trust user inputs. No matter what can be in there in the future, someone else might come in and things can change. So we need to make sure that we don't trust the inputs, right? Hidden items. So this is where usually it goes wrong. So there's some hidden items that we want to be changing, where we just temporarily have on the page, and there's items that we should never be changing. Like when we go from one page to another, like form report to a form, we don't want that form ID to be changing as someone wants, right? So we want to protect that. And with hidden items, it's important just to realize that when it's changed with JavaScript anywhere in the code, right, it can't be protected properly. So you need to make or do like make extra steps to keep that protected, right, and make sure that it doesn't change during the execution, that people who are only entitled or authorized to see it should sort of work with that IDs, right? Hidden items, there's two things. There's value protected, and that protects us from values being changed in JavaScript in the browser, right? And then we have another one, which is session state protection on the item level, which is like we need to say that page is session state protected, but also that the item is session state protected. So we would check it that page must have a checksum or that it's not unrestricted, right? So that's one of the settings that mostly goes away. And then display items, again, like values can be changed. That's what people forget, and we can set it to restricted from the browser, and then the browser won't be able to change your. Or with display only items, we need to make sure that they're not used in JavaScript, or have they been set by the end user, and then we need to sort of treat them with caution, right? I have an example where prepare URL can be abused as well, right? So it's about making sure that substitution strings are used if they're used, and we need to make sure that they're sanitized properly, right? SQL injection. So I have a few tips here for SQL injection. It's only to do with system that interact with database. So we pretty much we get the input, and then the input gets executed instead of being treated as data. That's pretty much what it comes down to. You see my example where I have a query that changed my result based on my inputs, right? How I can so what does that mean? I can literally execute DMLs and DDLs, like I can delete tables, or I can just get the data out and read stuff that I shouldn't be reading, right? Depending on the size of the system, or the I don't know if it's a bank or something, it can be catastrophic, right? But error messages are the ones who are giving out the secrets, right? So just if you can do something, it's like put an error message that doesn't give out details, right? In APEX, where we can see problems with SQL injection is like using substitution variables or dynamic SQLs, right? Statements. It can be a cursor statement, execute immediate, or APEX API, right? But sometimes we can use in our reports function returning query, so that can be abused as well. Like prepare URL, and I have examples that I can show you later if there's going to be time, with comments and conditions. You've seen the code that HTTP was abused as well and some levels where you normally wouldn't expect that it can be abused just because its substitution variable was in there, right? How we can prevent SQL injection. So this is why we're here. It's like validate and sanitize data. You don't want to get your data being like treated as a dump, right? So you don't want to dump everything in your data. You need to sanitize it. And I know that sometimes drives the users mad. You can't enter double quotes, you can't enter this, you can't enter that. So they want everything always open, right? Not the best way to go. If you can sanitize it before it goes in, and also when you read it out, we need to sanitize it as well. So there's two levels of these, and also we can validate it. That's another thing. There's like tons of sessions out there that show you how you can validate your data in Apex, so I won't go into it. And pretty much don't trust on like substitution variables. So anything that came from a database, you need to treat with respect and sort of make sure that it's escaped properly, or where it's going to be used, and have you sort of make sure that everything is right. And don't concatenate, even though if it's like a bind variables, right? It can still lead to trouble, right? If it's a single quote, or like if you need to encode it, you're gonna and like maybe have issues with it, right? And again, error handling function is a must. These are some APIs that help you, right? APEX-Sert and APEX-Escape. And then pretty much I can jump on cross-site scripting, just a few tips on it. It's pretty much same thing as SQL injection, just on a JavaScript on the browser side. And it, of course, happens when we don't validate or don't encode and don't safely treat our user input data, right? And pretty much, usually in Apex, it happens when we try to do something fancy, like on reports, we want to have a uppercase, or we want to have a bolded font, or we want to change, and we use that HTML expression unescaped thing, and then pretty much it just opens the gate to everything. With cross-site scripting, it's about the context. So I have here, which I borrowed from Reg Guys. Pretty much the idea is depending on where that data that you're reading from a database, where it's being used, it can be, and it needs to be escaped in a different ways, right? Pretty much these are some of the most common. So escape special characters on the report column, leave it on anytime you want, right? Anytime you can. Report formatting, so HTML expression, be careful when you use JavaScript links there. List of values as well, HTTP you've seen, and substitution variables in JavaScript, all of these can lead to trouble, right? How do we prevent this? So validate and sanitize is the same for both, which is JavaScript, like SQL injection and cross-site scripting, and pretty much it needs to be relevant to the context. Filtering input is harder because it just annoys people, right? So pretty much, yeah, if you can escape that, and you can use HTML formatting on most of these components nowadays in Apex, which then Apex is handling the escape for you out of the box, right? Restrict user inputs, and these are some APIs that you can be using for sort of doing these things. And then these are just, I'll sort of stop here because these are just the short versions of the same thing. So instead of using the APIs, we can just use it in our templates and reports. We can use these short escape, like this is in short version of escaping the items, right? And then we can restrict the inputs by just the setting in Apex on item level, which is some of them we can block some of the inputs. Just rethink if you want to be, if you need to use this. Sometimes you can, sometimes you don't want to, and that's perfectly fine. Another level of protection is monitor and sort of monitor your logins and access to your workspaces and your apps, right? Attackers will be there every day. They'll try to do things that you don't know, and it's good to know that at least these IPs have been there and they shouldn't be, so you can block the IPs. That's the easiest one. You can keep the log of this and stuff like that, so you have the information. Wonderful thing in Apex 21 that I love, this is one of my best features, is under application utilities, there is embedded code. Every code that you have embedded in my application here, so is it JavaScript or not, it's listed in this screen, right? Which gives me a beautiful way or easy way for me to sort of browse around my code. I know if this was a huge app, this would be a nightmare, right? But I can find a way to copy this across and just get this inspected by a security scan, like either a person or a process, right? With that said, security tools, I highly advise like Apex Advisor. I know most people are not using it, and probably we should be using it more. It's a little bit cumbersome to get in, but anyway, use Advisor because it's there, right? APEXSec, that's a tool that we need to pay a license for, but it really does a good job, right? Pretty much it can scan the PL SQL code, your packages and your JavaScript as well, your files, and it can be uploaded as a zip. So very powerful tool and very interesting, right? And then we have APEX-Sert. So unfortunately, still there's no publicly available download version of it, but something might come in the future. So currently there's a version of 18 and 19 that's supported, but we've tweaked it for 21 and 20 as well. So hopefully we might hear something new there. There is no license on this, and it's free. You just have to install it and just run your tests. And pretty much this is where I want to testing tools, use testing tools. There's many of them. I'll just mention it where they're helpful, like for the upgrades or security checks. Two tools that I highly recommend, CYPRESS and Ghost Inspector, right? There's many of them available. So it's one liner to install CYPRESS and pretty much you can run your test. Similar to the Ghost Inspector, it's like addition to Chrome or Firefox. You just install it and pretty much works similar to Selenium IDE, right? You click a record, you say, I want to assert, I want to test, I want to see, I want to continue my record, save the recording, and that's your test, right? And processes. So this is at the end. So run the advisor, right? And make sure you deploy the apps as no debug and run only in production environments, right? But what I want to emphasize is everyone should have one of these apps that checks your applications. And to finish off today's session, I have one of these apps here. So firstly, it's all to do with application, like my Apex views. And I'm using just application, so Apex application in this one. I can easily check, for example, compatibility view, have my, do I have error handling function? You can see I have none of them here, which is not nice. So all of my apps don't have any error handling here, which is not, I can immediately, I don't have any authorizations here. Just by browsing this page, and I can highlight, I can use highlight in interactive reports to sort of warn me on where the lines are that I'm worried about. Not just that, anything that I've showed you, anything that the security tools will be checking, you can check by yourself. So I have examples here, like, am I checking page settings for my app? So I can go through my, what are the settings that I don't like allow duplicate submissions. I can check which one doesn't have it. Page access protection, page requires authentication, does it have autocomplete? And so on. Do my buttons have authorization? Do my applications processes have authorization? My page processes, are my items protected? Do my page region have authorization? Do I have an IG process with no authorization? And so on and so on. There's many things that we can detect for cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and other things like for upgrading. Do I use JavaScript external files or not? And what do they do and stuff like that? Do I do IG attributes and do my columns in IG have some JavaScript on it? And just by using this, I can easily bring my apps. So I can inspect, you can see here, I can inspect my app just quickly running through and seeing where I have issues. So I can see here pages with no protection and no authorization, right, which is wrong. And then I can go in and change that. These are all based, there's like, I think I have 20 at this stage, all views just using, sorry about that, just using the dynamic, and pretty much all you just need to ask yourself the right questions. Which things should not be happening? And I have a list of them here. And pretty much all I've done is just use Apex internal views to sort of build this up. Have that app, and that can help you tremendously. You don't need any external tools pretty much after that. Automate your release cycles and pretty much use that embedded code if you can, if you don't have any other way. Stay proactive, and pretty much, yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it offline or online. Francisco, if there's any question, I apologize for being like 10 minutes over, but it's an interesting topic, and pretty much I could go on like probably a day about it, and I'm hoping people will get the sense of just knowing where the problem is, and then just go to the dictionary view and try to sort of see how you can detect the problem. And that's about it, just easy format.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lino. No problem at all going over. It looks like it's a good topic for you to create kind of a workshop and go through the people, to go through the views, create some reports like the one you did, and a lot of things like that. It could be an interesting topic, but for sure you already have a lot on your plate, but no worries. If anyone has any question for Lino, please feel free to post in the chat. It looks like the people is a little bit shy. Today we have tons of questions, and looks like it's getting late in the day. The people is getting a little bit shy. Let's wait a few more seconds to see if any questions. But no problem. If there's no questions, Lino, Thank you so much. Like always, Jen is saying thank you for the presentation. And thank you so much, Lino, for taking the time and share all this with the community in our Asia Pacific and now around the world, because not only people from Asia Pacific participate in this event. But thank you so much for taking the time and sharing a little bit of your knowledge and this interesting topic with all the APEX community around the world. Daniel is also saying thank you to you, Lino.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for being here. And thanks, Francisco, for organizing this.
Thank you so much, everyone, and please be safe. And we have more sessions coming tomorrow too. We have one more after Lino, then we have 3 more tomorrow to close the event. And audio replays will be available 24 hours or less after each session, and will be available if you connect to the event page. You go to your attendee tab. You're going to see your schedule for the sessions you'll register. And the ones that already passed and the replay is ready, you're going to see a link to the replay. You can watch as many times as you want until April 20. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Lino. And please be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.